All right, welcome back to our discussion on the road to the cross and really getting into why Jesus came to die. We will continue our discussion today on faith and failure. And quite honestly, this one, gosh, there's so many examples in the Bible of faith and failure, where they come together, where there's perseverance and success, and where there is failure. But one of the things that I often myself relate to, especially with this, is reminding myself regularly, sometimes multiple times a day, um, that one of the key verses that we'll discuss is, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Now that may seem pretentious, that may seem exaggerated, and in fact, in our lives, we may have been like, well, I believed and I didn't get it the way that I wanted. It didn't come in the way that I expected. My prayers weren't heard. My prayers weren't answered. It's not a debate about that. Um, as we know, God created us. God knows what we truly need. And there's the big differences in what we need versus what we want. And that can get very difficult as we, go through the emotions and struggles of life and loss and failure and success. But Jesus is going to be very, very clear here about faithfulness, and uses that as an example. So let's go ahead and dig into it. So we're going to start out in Luke chapter 9, verse 37. And this is where a boy is healed. Now, the way that I've set these verses up to discuss as typical is in a sequence. And we're starting this one in what's the smallest context between the Gospels of this specific instance, this specific story or act. And this is about a boy is healed. And so I'll read starting with verse 37. Now it happened on the day that they had come down from the mountain that a great multitude met him. Suddenly, a man from the multitude cried out, saying, "Teacher, I implore you, look on my son, for he is my only child. And behold, a spirit seizes him, and he suddenly cries out. It convulses him so that he foams at the mouth, and it departs from him with great difficulty, bruising him. So I implore your disciples to cast it out, but they could not." Then Jesus answered and said, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." And he and as he was still coming, the demon threw him down and convulsed him. Then Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the child, and gave him back to his father. Now, this in itself is a great story of faithfulness. The father, the man, knows and has heard about Jesus, has heard about what he has done and the miracles he has performed. And he loves his child just like any other parent should love their child. You'll do anything to take care of your child. So he goes to Jesus and says, "Teacher, I implore you, please look on my son. He's my only child. He's all I have." And at that moment, the demon within the child causes him to have a seizure, foam at the mouth, and casts his body around. And Jesus answers and says, "O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and bear with you? Bring your son here." Now, this is kind of a two-part process where what Jesus is speaking about here. And we'll see that here in a moment. So let's go on to Matthew. So again, Matthew, excuse me, chapter 17, starting with verse 14. Let's read together. And when they had come to the multitude, a man came to him, kneeling down to him and saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is an epileptic, and suffers severely, for he often falls into the fire, and often into the water. So I brought him to your disciples, but they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. And Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, Why could we not cast it out? So Jesus said to them, Because of your unbelief. For assuredly I say to you, if you have faith of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. So, with this passage, we get some more detail, a little bit more context, is what is provided here in Matthew. And we see that the dad knows that he has epilepsy, but we also find out that the boy falls in the fire and the water as the demon is tormenting this child. Jesus again says, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him here to me. Jesus again rebukes the demon, but the disciples, think of this. The disciples have already been gone out, that Jesus has already given them the word to go out and share the message with the people. He's given them the power. But the disciples weren't able to be successful in casting out this demon. And Jesus, in no uncertain terms, explains why. Because of your unbelief, for assuredly I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, Move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you. However, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. So Jesus is telling him, you were ill prepared. You did not do and follow the word and guidance I'd given you. Based on this, he's saying, you didn't prepare, you didn't pray, you didn't fast, you didn't prepare your body and your spirit for the battle of taking on this unclean spirit. Additionally, Jesus gives reference to the parable of the mustard seed. If your faith is as a mustard seed. A mustard seed, if you've not ever seen, is a very, very small seed, but it makes a very big plant. But it's saying if your faith is just barely a speck, you will be able to move mountains. Now, again, with this, and as I said earlier, faithfulness and failure. We often fail. The question is, how often do we fail because of our lack of faith? Because we lose faith in the process, because we get discouraged, we get beat down, we get frustrated because it doesn't go our way. Faith does not always mean success, but you will not have spiritual success without faith. You will not be able to continue to seek Him, God, Jesus, everlasting life, without faith. It's impossible. Let's go ahead and jump over to Mark. So in Mark chapter 9, verses 14 through 28, you see we get a little bit more detail. And this is what I love about the gospel stories. Because if you don't understand it in one way, or one way doesn't quite hit right, or doesn't give you the right information, often there is another version, there's another description, and it provides you more detail, more context. That's why when you read the Bible, it's important to look at your cross references and look at the rest of the story and the other versions of it. Because after you read the three versions, the picture becomes clear. So again, Mark chapter 9, verse 14. And when he came to the disciples, he saw a great multitude around them, and the scribes disputing with them. Immediately when they saw him, all the people were greatly amazed, and running to him, greeted him. And he asked the scribes, "What are you discussing with them?" Then one of the crowd answered and said, "Teacher, I brought you my son who has a mute spirit. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. So I spoke to your disciples, and that they should cast it out, but they could not." He answered him and said, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I bear with you? Bring him to me." Then they brought him to him, and he saw him. Immediately the spirit convulsed him, and he fell on the ground and wallowed and foamed at the mouth. So he asked his father, "How long has this been happening?" And he said, "From childhood. And often he has thrown him both into the fire and into the water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us." Jesus said to him, "If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes." Immediately the father of the child cried out and said with tears, "Lord, I believe, help my unbelief." When Jesus saw the people came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "Deaf and dumb spirit, I command you to come out of him and enter him no more." Then the spirit cried out, convulsed him greatly, and came out of him, and he became one dead, so that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had come out of the house, his disciples asked him privately, "Why could we not cast him out?" So he said to them, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting." So again, a little bit more information, some additional details that we didn't have previously. Prayer and fasting, preparing our body for the spiritual warfare. The battles that we don't see, we feel them. And in this case, the dad was definitely seeing the spiritual battle. But Jesus says a lot here. And he's been saying a lot in all three verses, or all three passages, where Jesus says, "O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you?" Jesus knows that his life is soon coming to an end. Imagine in his shoes. You know that your journey to the cross and your death is not very far away. And you are doing everything you can to teach these hard-headed, stubborn people that just are all in their feels. They want to do what they feel is good and right, which is not necessarily the path of the righteous, the path of God. And he's trying to show them, and he shows them with miracles of why being a faithful servant, why being faithful and following God, why he is the path to righteousness in the kingdom of heaven. Jesus shows us time and time and time again. We see it time and time and time again in the New Testament. But Jesus is saying, "How long shall I be with you? My time is limited. I'm trying to get this in your thick skulls. Will you please understand? How long shall I bear with you? How long shall I keep doing this?" And then he says, "Bring him to me." Jesus continues in verse 23. If you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. I believe that. But I also believe that everything I want will not be answered. I understand that God will provide, has always provided what we truly need. And sometimes that isn't the answer that we're looking for. Sometimes it's not the path of least resistance. Sometimes we're incurring great loss and not getting the answers we want. Then Jesus lastly says this kind of spirit can come out by nothing but prayer and fasting. Prayer is important. Most of us do not pray nearly enough, nearly as much as we should. But just as the Father had said to Jesus, he dropped to his knees and he said, cried out in tears, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. That's a prayer in itself. When we're struggling with our worldly issues, our troubles and tribulations, Lord, I believe. Help my unbelief. We all fall into this trap. And it's Satan. It's evil trying to persuade us and pull us away from the light. You know where the light is. Continue to follow it, continue to seek it, and continue to pray and allow your faith to overcome failure. We'll see you next week.